Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Nate,
Hello, I'm Steve.
and we are the Dungeon Vets. And today we're doing a movie talk on the second movie of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers. If you don't know who we are, we're a few military veterans as well as veterans of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And we take a look at different media, movies, books, and things like that. And we talk about how they might translate over to the D&D 5th edition mechanics and rule set and things like that. And we also talk a lot about what inspiration you can take from the media to use in your own game.
And so today we're continuing the saga, the original campaign, the original campaign at that.
The OG, the GOAT. I think we started off saying that in the Fellowship too. Because it is.
So I guess we should start how we always do. Let's rank or rate the film. What did you guys think about it?
Do we even have to with Lord of the Rings?
No, we probably don't.
Yeah, this was a weird, when I thought about this in my prep, I was just like, oh, is this going to be a different bit
Probably
each time we
not.
do number 2 and the number 3? But okay, how about this? Which do you like better, 1 or 2?
Yeah, I was going to say let's do our rankings within the series.
Okay.
So
then we're all in agreement. We're just going to rank all of them 5 out of 5.
Pretty much.
All right.
Yeah, as a whole, they're all 5s.
They're
it's
great.
5 out of
They
5.
really are.
It's my favorite movies.
But compared to each other, this is a cool question.
Compared to each other, do we want to start with our Fellowship ranking with that in mind first? Then
I think we just say no. I think The Two Towers was better than The Fellowship of the Ring. That's
I agree.
I agree.
yeah. I knew we
In
would,
fact-
and I knew we would.
The Two Towers is my favorite of the 3, actually.
I don't think we're breaking any new ground with these opinions. Yeah, the
It's a
Two
real,
Towers.
it's a real hot take.
I thought there might be a little bit of controversy between like which is better, The Two Towers or Return of the King. Both I think are slightly edge out the Fellowship.
Okay, so we all agree The Two Towers is the better film. It's been a long time since I've seen Return of the King, so I might end up liking that one more, but we'll have to see.
To be honest, though, it's not by a long shot. And if I'm gonna sit down, I'm never gonna just watch The Two Towers. I'm gonna watch The Fellowship first, and I'm gonna watch The Return of the King after.
See, I've actually watched the Two Towers by itself many times. I don't think that I'll be swayed at all. I'm pretty sure number 2 is my favorite and the best of the series.
I mean, it's fine to not watch The Fellowship first. It's not illegal, but I mean, it's kind of wrong.
I think we've all discussed too, whenever we talk about books, that we typically prefer the bridge book, the second book in a trilogy.
Yes.
So this was my first time watching the extended version, which I didn't realize I had never seen the extended version before. I was happily surprised and sometimes kind of unpleasantly bored by a couple of these scenes. And I can see why some cuts were made for the theatrical release, definitely. But man, there was a lot to enjoy, and I had a much more enjoyable time than I thought I was going to.
If I remember, did it start with Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, or Frodo and Sam doing like the elven rope thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think last time we talked, we kind of split up, like we imagined, the narrator is the DM kind of thing, and the party members are split into like 3 parties at this point. And Frodo and Sam are one of those party members, or parties, rather.
Yeah, so like with this party, this session, they get lots of exploration rolls, skill checks, acrobatic stuff, that's a funny little joke the DM played on Frodo by being like, "Oh, you fall," and it's only 10 feet down. And then, Frodo, though, notices, he rolls high on his perception check to notice that they're being followed. And so they plan a little ambush, and you get a little combat session in there, too. But the combat session actually turns into a character reveal, which is a cool way to do a party edition. Very cool.
That's
Always
right.
fun to start out a character introduction with some conflict with the party.
This is Boromir's player coming back to the table. Boromir's died. He's re-rolled into Gollum.
I'm pretty sure Boromir's playing his brother Faramir.
You think so?
I think Faramir's an NPC.
Yeah, I mean that's probably more accurate.
Yeah.
He doesn't really play big enough of a role to.
Yeah, I
consider
like that
PC.
Boromir was just like, no, I want to go in the complete opposite direction of my last character.
But still be the best RPer out there.
I feel really bad about the time that I went for Frodo because I was under the influence of the ring. So now I want to make it up to him by helping them on their side of things.
But secretly, I'm the same character, and I'm gonna go
But
after.
But guess what?
I just love
I'm gonna
this
do it
flaw.
again.
I just love this character flaw. I want to incorporate it into every character.
That would be fucking hilarious to me if you had that like a player do something like that. Like, no, I kind of want to make it up to him with my next character, and then it's like, but I'm gonna do it again.
So yeah, and this is a really cool RP dynamics for the party between Gollum, who obviously poses some sort of danger at times, Frodo, who is under the influence, and then Sam, who has to deal with jealousy and pain of seeing Frodo under the influence. And so this makes, but they have to work together still. This is cool party dynamics.
Yeah, this particular party or this particular campaign that the party is on is much heavier exploration than it is anything else. Most of the social aspects are confined to them, which can be okay if you try to do that in a real campaign. It depends on your players, of course, but I think it would be hard to have players who are so forward-minded as to just keep going and only RP with each other whenever they want.
We did say that the hobbits they're special D&D players. They love the RP. They love the stealth trickery stuff. That's what they want to do.
The combat is a very small aspect of their campaign.
Those players
And I mean,
exist.
you could. Yeah, I was gonna say you could throw some combat in there. I don't think it would be too difficult. They're in enemy territory.
Yeah.
Those things in the marshes, those bodies in the marshes, could have come out of the marsh and attacked. Things like that.
There could be monsters in the rocks other than Gollum, and then Gollum could warn them about the monsters, and they all have to fight the monsters together. That's a pretty cool D&D session right there.
When they fall down the scree and are hiding under the cloak, they could just be found and have to fight those orcs.
Those weren't orcs.
Those are Uruks. Oh no, those are Eastern men.
Those are men.
Those are men.
Yeah.
There's a big column of men marching into the open gate.
right.
That's like a deadly encounter right there if they have to fight.
But they went pretty far away from those. What was it? Two guys who went to check out whatever it was. They were like, "What's that over there? A mile away? Let's go check it out."
Which that always. I was just thinking about this scene. It struck me as slightly odd. Like they're marching in a formation, and just two of them just look over there and decide to get out of formation and just start looking on their own. And nobody's like, "Hey, where the fuck are you going?"
They're the people in charge, marching on the left middle of the formation.
Yeah.
That's where you put your COs.
As one does.
That way, snipers can't find them. They just look like everyone else. Who would have thought?
But yeah, then so we get our new party, and we then flash back to our other party, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas.
Our more classic D&D party with more classic D&D escapades.
Yep.
Yeah.
By the way, would you give them exhaustion? Because they just straight up ran.
So this is what I would say. I have a whole list here that is Aragorn is a ranger. When we did party talk last week, Nate said something about there's some conversation about whether he's a ranger or a fighter or something. I don't think there's any conversation. I feel very strongly about this. He is a ranger, and I got the facts right here. I got the receipts. One of them is the fact that you don't ever see Aragorn get tired in travel. And for that matter, you don't really see, other than for comedic purposes, people get tired traveling with Aragorn.
It's favorite terrain.
That's ranger stuff right there.
Yeah, that's favorite terrain.
Yes.
You can travel twice as fast through
That's
a
very
terrain
true.
that you're familiar with. So totally.
He's listening to the ground and he hears the orcs speed up. That's ranger stuff. So
What is that? Primeval awareness?
So I wouldn't give them exhaustion. I feel like that they are just moving at a double pace, which is in the Rangers level 2 feature.
Yeah.
In their favored terrain.
That's very neat and a cool use of rangers that in my experience, I have not really seen used very often. Which gets me into my next point is this whole sequence, this chase sequence of them having to hunt down something that's running away from them over a long period of time and distance is also something that I don't really hear too much about, but I think it'd be a very interesting scenario to play in. Um, Figuring out how you're going to keep up with these people or, hinder them if at all possible when they're so far away.
Yeah, the only issue I could find, yeah, it would be a super cool scenario, but running it, I think I would need to workshop a little bit how you would do it specifically because imagine, so you're chasing your quarry, they're 2 days ahead of you. Make a skill check or whatever, and okay, you guys all rolled high in your athletics or whatever. You get within 1 day. Yeah, you're 1 day behind them now, and then what do? You make like make a perception check. You hear that they're speeding up. What then, as the players, do you do? That's the difficulty with running this kind of scenario, is because like, oh, we keep going but faster, or we take a path, or like it would be up to the players to be like, do I know a way around or where they're going, and maybe I could make a shortcut of some type. Um,
I would actually put it more heavily on the DM to basically make this more than just skill checks to see if you can be faster than them. Throw some obstacles in their way. Give them the opportunity to take shortcuts, but at a risk, All the while you have this time pressure on you to catch up or get to them before something happens. It doesn't have to be them running away with hostages. It could be something else, but it's that time pressure that I think is really kind of throws an interesting factor into this whole travel thing, which is basically just you traveling, but very difficult.
I would say that the time crunch for them is based around each activity that you encounter. I would probably say that there's some sort of encounter that the orcs have as well. So in its most simplest form, you could say the orcs roll to get past this really tough terrain athletics check, and they got a 10. You roll and you get a nat 20, so you then move one increment further towards the orcs. And then you're both going to come to another obstacle later. So every obstacle that the party encounters, the orcs also encountered first, and you, the DM, need to roll to see how the orcs handled that sort of scenario. And then that way you have something else that can bring the orcs back that's outside of the party's control, but the party also has something that can move them forward.
Interesting.
If the party's, if they get defeated in combat by these weird monster hyenas that show up that, are just some random combat encounter, then that's hugely detrimental to their chase scene, So it's...
I'll tell you, don't roll those orc rolls to get across those obstacles on the table. Do those to yourself. Because you have two really bad scenarios, which is where the party keeps failing and they just fucking get away. And it's like, well, shit. And then the other scenario, the orcs just keep rolling badly and badly and badly, and the party catches up in a quarter of the time you expected them to, and your whole chase sequence is over. Which maybe that's okay, but maybe you want this to last a little longer.
Maybe that's what happens in the movie, because they don't ever actually catch the orcs.
No.
And so... The DM is just like, all right, well, you come over the hill and there's this big swarm of riders, and you thereby learn that they have already killed the orcs.
Which is that's still not a win for the party, though, necessarily, because they didn't catch them. They haven't rescued their friends. They're told,
Yeah, that would be unsatisfying, I imagine.
Agree.
Yeah, but that could be a sort of a compromise. If the party keeps failing, it's like, well, I don't want their quarry to just get away and their friends to die, but let's not give them the win they wanted, but something a little different, which they still they need to keep working towards tracking them in this dangerous forest now.
Yeah. So it is unsatisfying, but it's also not complete yet. You're still going.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in D&D you probably never, maybe not never, but for the most part you don't want someone else to take the party's credit. As the players, that doesn't feel good, or it might feel a little bit like, I'm sure we've all been in a scenario where maybe there's a new DM or something, and the party's on the back ropes, they're about to die, and then they get saved. And, I would say 7 times out of 10, I'd be just fucking kill me. I'd rather die than be saved.
No, I'm not getting on the dragon. I'm dying here. You cowards fly away.
I'll jump off the cliff myself.
I agree. That is a very unsatisfying outcome when the DM swoops in to save the day.
But yeah, I could see there being a compromise, especially if maybe the riders of Rohan or the Rohirrim are maybe part of someone else's backstory. Then it could be like a more appropriate. Hey, you guys didn't get there fast enough, so this is going to happen instead. But hey, cool social component because these guys know each other.
And the party still at that point kind of thinks that they failed.
Yeah, and it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
But yeah, introducing Éomer. Cool character. Carl Urban. Fantasy Carl Urban.
Such a versatile actor.
Forgot it was Carl Urban. That guy's been around. He's done a lot of cool stuff.
Yes. That's Judge Dredd really cool. Riding on that horse right there.
Billy Butcher too.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy from Thor.
Yeah, that guy.
M16s. His most famous depiction, of course. But no, I like Éomer a lot. He's a really cool character. I could see Éomer being a PC. I think in this situation he's not. He's just a really cool aspect of the world. I think meeting princes and kings and such are a really cool part of D&D when you meet someone who lives up in the high house. You know, friends in high places are always valuable in D&D. I think a pretty solid addition to their network of people, you know?
It's definitely nice to have some NPCs that you can kind of call on when you're stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
If you happen to know one with this kind of expertise or someone who can hook you up with connections, horses, gold.
Exactly. But yeah, so we find out that they're late. The Éomer and his boys killed all the orcs after they started eating each other. Merry and Pippin got away, but they get some horses, and Aragorn then does a couple more ranger things and finds out they did in fact get away. He's, hands were bound, and he shimmied his way across this grass, and then went into Fangorn Forest, which is just this impenetrable wall of vegetation right next to a plain.
Yeah, an unbelievable feat of tracking by Aragorn here, and I mean that. It's unbelievable.
Yes, with the amount of horses and orcs and everything just running around that terrain. I was going to bring this up. I'm glad I don't have to.
And he can piece together everything, like event by event exactly.
And it would go on to inspire CSI Miami, which would run for 20 years.
So we said last time that Merry and Pippin, their players, had something to do, and they left the table, which is part of why the campaign was split into two tables, because he was like, okay, I got the RP guys, the ones who want to do trickery and stuff, Frodo and Sam, going this route, and then Boromir died, he's going to reroll to Gollum, and then I got these guys who are more typical combat-oriented people, and I'm going to give them a different style of campaign, chasing Merry and Pippin. Merry and Pippin are the prize. But then Merry and Pippin's players come back early, and the DM's like, oh.
I'm convinced that everything that Merry and Pippin do is all condensed into a one-shot.
Agreed. Absolutely. They were like, we can come back and we want to do something before we leave. And he's like, no, I already created this. Okay, fine. I'll make some adjustments. And he gives Merry and Pippin the chance to escape. So he backtracks a little bit and he's just like, all right, you're going on the orcs and you can tell that they're following you. What do you do? And Pippin makes a nat 20 stealth check so that the people right behind him don't see him go, puh. And he's able to help that way. And then they get the chance to escape later, which is a cool encounter. Definitely cool.
Then they meet talking trees, I guess.
I remember being terrified of the orc trying to eat them.
Oh yeah, he's a creepy dude, man.
I when I watched it again, I was like, dude, again, I still feel it. But also, I want to say, I forgot to mention this, when Gollum bites Sam's neck in the beginning, oh my God, is that jarring? That is so alarming. In a grimdark story, Sam dies and he becomes a Gollum or something. I was like, oh, I was so taken aback. I was not prepared. But yeah, so they then get chased by that very scary orc and they meet Treebeard.
I love the Ents. Just gonna say that now.
Yeah, they're funny. I remember being like, "Are you?" I was just as much as Mary and Pippin. Like, "Are you kidding me?" When they're at the end moot and they're like, "We've just finished saying good morning,
Yeah.
but it's nighttime."
I love how John Rhys Davies completely carries the comic relief in this movie. Not completely, but largely, because he is the voice of Treebeard and he plays Gimli, both of which give us a lot of the funniest moments, I think.
Oh man, freaking Gimli's laugh when Legolas is like, "Would you like me to get you a box?" He's like stone faced looking up at him, and then just breaks into this joyous laughter, like, "That was a good one." I'm short.
Never heard of hobbits. Sounds like orc mischief to me. He starts squeezing them. I started laughing when he said that.
That you are not orcs. And he looks so pleased with himself.
Like, good for you.
But then, so that in D&D, they're probably making. Do you guys want to just talk about Merry and Pippin's thing real quick?
Let's get it out of the way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Merry and Pippin have a lot more scenes in the extended version than were released in the theatrical cut. And then, so they probably have to make persuasion rolls and insight checks and heavy, but probably funny RP with this int moot.
Yeah, lots of persuasions and deceptions in order to get them to go south towards Isengard. Because they had the motive is like, I want to take this army of trees somewhere, which is a total player thought to have.
I can imagine the DM starting out trying to make this a very serious thing, but Merry and Pippin's players just being funny dudes, kind of making it into a comedic one.
Yeah. And I like the idea that it's a deception roll to go south, because it kind of is. He in the movie, he reasons it out to Treebeard as if it kind of makes sense, and Treebeard's like, "Oh, well, okay, you know better," and as if he gets outwitted. But I really like that, as if Pippin rolled a nat 20 persuasion roll, and he's just like, "Well, the closer we are to harm, the further we are from danger." What? But it's a nat 20, DM, and so
You say it with conviction like that. Well, and then even he says that doesn't make much sense to me. But you are small.
You are very small. So, reward. There you go.
So they do end up getting this cool combat scene at the very, which takes place at the end of the movie. But I like how this is the parallel to Helm's Deep. It's like, this is just as much on the same level as action, and we're going to cut in between. It's just as epic, just as amazing, and stuff like that. And it's just a bunch of trees absolutely destroying Isengard.
Yes.
Going to
siege
town.
Damage. Absolutely.
And I love how he's got Merry and Pippin riding up on Treebeard, and they're like, "Can we, throw some rocks or something? We would be part of this combat, too." Like, "Oh, yeah, sure." Clunk, clunk.
Where are they getting these rocks from?
Shut up.
They've got magic stone. Okay? My favorite moment in the entire movie is as the flood from the dam is rushing in, you see one Ent with his his hair on fire. He runs and dips it in. They made no attempt to make this look like a big, serious, ancient being. He literally looks like a silly stick figure going, "Ah!" Dips it in. I laugh at that every time.
It's like the lone Ent we see who takes any real significant damage or is threatened in any way. And it's just like, don't worry, folks, he made it back. He's okay, too. He dunked his head.
They say it's like the last march of the Ents, but they could continue marching. They didn't die. So
I think they expected more resistance than they got,
probably.
Maybe.
Who would have attacked Isengard? If not for the intervention,
the nerve
of two halflings,
the audacity of this forest.
And he just sat up there on top of his tower, just shaking his staff at them. Do something, Saruman.
Yeah, that's another thing. Is this dude is supposed to be the most powerful wizard in the world, or at least he was. And he doesn't really do a whole lot of powerful wizard shit.
He sends a storm against Gandalf and a dozen people, but
where's that now?
The Ents are knocking down his door. He can't conjure a storm.
How did he even get up there? Can he fly?
Yeah, does he like twirl up like Gandalf did, spinning around?
And so, because Merry and Pippin came back and they wanted their one shot to themselves, the DM said, okay, I have to give a new campaign directive to Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. So
Who better to lead them in this new quest than good old DMPC Gandalf?
He's back.
Who
He's better than ever.
By the way he comes back is just fucking hilarious. They're like,
yes.
oh shit, the white wizard draws near, and they're like, oh, we better get ready. And he blinds them and talks in Saruman's voice before revealing it's him. It's totally Gandalf, another of the one of the most powerful people in Middle Earth, just fucking with people, just having a laugh.
This is one of the biggest single pieces of evidence that Gandalf is controlled by the DM. That he just shows up randomly in the forest, better than ever, and it's like, I have come to give you guys a new mission, a new purpose, because Merry and Pippin are fine. They're with Ents.
And he pretty much does say that, yeah.
Because in the extended version, he talks more about the fact that Merry and Pippin were dropped right in front of his feet. That's in the theatrical cut. I remember that, but then it's never talked about their interaction with Gandalf the White. And Gandalf, he talks more, he gives the audience a hint that the Ents are going to wake up before we see that through Treebeard and Merry and Pippin. So I can see why they cut that to give Merry and Pippin's arc a little bit more. But I really like that bit where Gimli is like, this strange, foreboding, dark, charming forest.
Yeah.
And then Gandalf tells him, he's like, yeah, the Ents are about to wake up, so shit's going down.
Don't worry. He says, don't worry, you won't be in danger, except maybe Gimli. Basically, he says something to that effect. I'm just like, yeah, Gandalf is a goofster.
He is a goofster. When he comes back, our three heroes, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, have no idea what running away is, so they attack anything that is in front of them. They attack Gandalf. And then Gandalf is like, oh, it's just me. And then like, oh my gosh, what's the new quest? To which he sends them to Rohan.
To Rohan. One of probably my favorite society in Lord of the Rings world is Rohan. I love Rohan ever since I was a kid. I used to have a big flag of Rohan up in my room. I just love those cavalry societies. I love cavalry.
Up your alley.
Yeah. And that's another thing. I say this as if I know what everyone is doing in their games out there. I feel like I don't see a whole lot of those, or I don't see them utilized. Maybe. I don't know where I'm going with this.
I feel like
it's
I get what you're
difficult
saying.
to include mounts sometimes in
That's
D&D
where I was
combat
going.
because it's this whole extra creature that can have its own action, and there's usually a lot more movement. Movement can get really complicated too when you're mounting and dismounting and stuff.
I would say D&D 5th edition is a little bit lacking in the mounted character type stuff and mounted combat. And I understand why. So you have mounted combatant feat, which is pretty much a must if you want to play that kind of character. They have the Cavalier fighter subclass, which really only gives you, I think, one or two things that have to do with being on your mount. In mounted combat itself, it does give you some advantages, but I mean, not nearly to the extent that you would see reflected in reality, which of course it's not going to. But I kind of understand why, is because you would have to play all the time being on a mount.
And in D&D you have to go super niche to get those benefits to that. And then if you lose your mount, or your character kind of sucks, or it's just not as effective, maybe that could be really fun to RP. I don't want to take away from any class or any build that you could, trying to get back to your mount and trying to struggle through with not having all of your features. That can be wildly fun. But I can see why it's difficult.
You can't really bring the mount in the dungeon with you,
Yeah, or in the church or something,
Yeah. A lot of places you can't bring them out that you typically go in a D&D game. So it's it's a huge crutch. But you do get to shine sometimes, and those times are very fun.
And you do get to go to Edoras, which, just real quick, doesn't look like a place that houses a king. It looks like, a nice fort.
It actually looks more close to history, I would say, which, is definitely not a consistent thing in the Lord of the Rings movies, like Minas Tirith.
Yeah,
it's nothing close to what you'd see in
If I was
history,
Theoden, I would hate going to Minas Tirith. I would be like, oh, man, this is where he lives. He's not even a king. He's a steward.
Yeah, but Rohan is not, so large and rich, I guess.
All right,
as Gondor.
I'm an elitist, I suppose. Fine.
But no, you're right. It's not this big, crazy fantasy castle. It's just kind of like you said, it's almost like a Viking longhouse sort of deal.
It's very nice, very big and nice looking, yeah.
And then, they get to Edoras. We meet Eowyn, who has a big time crush on Aragorn, which who can blame her? It's a heck of a man, that Aragorn. Except he's not a man. He's one of the Dunedain.
Yeah, he's an 87-year-old. The Dunedain are still men, right?
Yeah, I guess they're just blessed with long life.
I wouldn't consider them men. I would consider them men plus.
Variant humans.
Yeah. They're...
So, the first thing in Edoras is if you want to expand this in D&D, which I think you probably should and can have more fun with it, is kind of a mystery plot in uncovering the fact that the king's advisor is actually poisoning his mind. Spoiler alert, grimy Wormtongue is a villain.
Yeah, the way
even in the 30s, wasn't that, like, I don't know.
Yeah, and
the way it's done in the movie is definitely not the way you ought to do it in D&D, which is where they come in, Gandalf immediately solves the problem, and then they go and ride off and do other things.
If this were like a D&D situation, you could make it funny still and have like some difficulty to it instead of just being like, okay, you populate the room with NPCs, you give them all the descriptions, maybe you have pictures associated with them, and the party has to like think which one of these guys is the bad guy, and then you have Grima Wormtongue's picture there, and you're like, it's that guy. That guy's the bad guy.
See, your party's not going to pick that guy, though, because they're going to be like, that's way too obvious.
That's too obvious.
There's no way it's that guy. This is a red herring for sure.
It's the guard. It's his head guard.
It's Gambling.
Yeah, Gambling. That's his name. Yeah. Either way, it could be a cool mystery that could take us a couple sessions. I did think the confrontation in the Longhouse was a little unrealistic, where they just they get in and then we're in charge now. And they just start beating people up, and all the guards are just like, "Okay, we're cool with that, I guess."
I think they show them and they hold them back. They know there's something wrong with their king, and they know this wizard just came in, and so some of them who are still loyal to old King Theo.
I think that this guy's the stupidest guy in Middle Earth.
Which guy?
The head guard.
Oh,
okay.
Is that
because?
Gambling?
Who is this Rohan guy who's clearly from Rohan that is willing to betray his king and follow Grima's orders, which are, I maintain that what we see in the movie, Grima Wormtongue is obviously not doing things for the good of Theoden or anything like that. Those men who actually threw out Eomer in the beginning, they're absolute traitors. And then Wormtongue told you to take his staff and you didn't? He specifically said, I told you to take his staff, and you didn't? So not only are you bad at, following your job as a guard of Rohan, you're also just incredibly bad at your job. And I was just like, this guy is the stupidest person. I was glad when he died, and I just want to get that on the audio.
There's definitely, I feel like we're missing a lot of background and context for this whole stuff, because we come in and we're just seeing, why are they following this slimy dude?
Yeah.
But there's a lot we don't see with Theoden, them
We don't
coming
get
from
any of
him,
that.
since he is totally taken over by Saruman,
We really don't see much of their society either, other than that they just have peasants like everyone else.
Yeah, peasants and cavalry. That's us.
More cheer in a graveyard.
You'd find more cheer in a graveyard. But yeah, then Theo gets through amazing effects, becomes himself
Remove
again.
curse works, baby.
Yeah.
Remove curse works. Dang, that's a heck of a curse, too. But he becomes his old self. He grabs his sword and he's like, okay, time to be me again. And then immediately realizes they're under attack. And so the obvious thing to do is to run. And there are people who are like criticizing his move. What is Edoras going to do under a massive army of orcs heading their way?
They don't actually know about the massive army yet.
They just
That's
know that
being
they're
kept hidden in Isengard.
right.
But they know that Saruman does have an army and wants to attack.
Whether or not what you should have done, could have done, the DM said that this is what the king wants to do. And the party is just like, no, we think we should do what the DMPC suggested, persuasion roll, and they fail. And so now, escort mission, not on your terms. We're going that way instead of that way.
And the DM rejoices as he's been thinking about this big set piece battle for months and months and months. And it's finally all about to come to fruition. And then Aragorn almost freaking dies. And everything is almost ruined. As they're on their way to Helm's Deep. And then, bam, some combat. Cool, the scout wargs and all that. DM's probably not expecting anyone to die here. Just, it's been a while since we had combat. Let's throw some in. And then Aragorn almost freaking dies.
Probably looking, honestly, to pick off like some of the villagers and make the players kind of defend them, which is a pretty interesting combat scenario and a frustrating one at times because it's pretty difficult to defend weak NPCs. And if you go in with the expectation that we're not going to lose any, it's rough. It's a rough fight to do if you're against some quick mobile enemies like that. You're probably going to lose.
It's a realistic strategy too. When you have this long supply line, cavalry is going to be just harassing because they can get hit and runs in without any obstacles or without anything stopping.
They do the right thing, which is drawing them out to combat with the soldiers they do have away from the line of folks. And the Warg Riders kind of do the dumb thing and follow them to go fight them. But, I mean, I don't think it's really put out there that orcs are particularly tactically proficient.
That's just the DM providing combat.
That's the DM rewarding the players,
yeah.
I think. Because the players are like, oh, we'll go this way to draw them away. Even though you could clearly see the two parties moving in different directions. That was your intent, and so the DM's like, okay,
I don't know.
So
I would have. If you're going away from the squishy people, I'm just going to keep attacking those squishy people.
Yeah, same here.
Maybe he gave him a chance to roll for it then, like.
I think orcs are dumb. Orcs do dumb things.
Yeah.
Yeah, these orcs especially are dumb.
Unfortunately.
And so they survive, or they all almost survive the combat encounter.
Gimli gets pinned by what? A warg, an
Oh
orc,
my God.
and then another warg.
He reaches up and snaps an orc's neck with a warg on top of him, in between him and the orc. That is strength.
Yeah.
Good God.
You know what tells me Gimli's got 20 strength, or maybe even a belted giant strength or something? It's because
he's got those belts. Yes,
because he has.
belt.
Even after the second warg falls on him, you can still see him pushing them up. Like he doesn't throw them off him, but he's making movement there with his arms. It's like, God dang, Gimli's strong.
I would love to do this in the future. Having any kind of ambiguity to something that happens, where you can like fool the players, and so Aragorn falls off a cliff. All right, and then immediately the NPCs are like, "We gotta go. We have to go. We gotta leave him." And then if you're in person, I'm just gonna take Aragorn's sheet and let everyone sweat.
Yeah.
And then you do a one shot on the side maybe, but eventually Aragorn
Have
comes
him
back.
leave the Discord call.
Yeah, leave the Discord call. Like,
I don't know. Even as a player, if my character died, I probably still would hang around to spectate. But
cool opportunity there to make everyone else sweat.
More ranger shit. Aragorn speaks with animals and calms down that horse back in the stables, and then said horse comes and saves him off the riverbank. Oh, that's a ranger scene, baby. And cool exploration-based, stealth-based one-shot. Maybe Aragorn has a little combat encounter with an orc scouting party or something as he's trying to avoid the column.
Sure.
But he survives, and edgelord that he is, he gets to open the double doors. um,
I mean, Peter Jackson said the Two Towers was mainly about Aragorn. But now we get to the real meat and potatoes of the Two Towers. Helm's Deep.
Which, at this point in your campaign, you've been preparing this for months and months, and the players have been blissfully unaware for the most part. But then as a player, you eventually know when something's coming. Like, you know when you're going into one of these kind of sessions. As a player, what kind of preparations would you make before this sort of thing? Outside of RP, what would your characters do outside of RP to prepare for this kind of thing?
Yeah, when I was looking at Helm's Deep, I divided it into like phases, and this one is the pre-battle, which is RP. Definitely, we see lots of good RP with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Theoden too. Theoden, by the way, could be maybe a guest star to the campaign, just for this arc, because he has lots of agency. It seems like, more so than Gandalf does in a way when he's with the party.
Yeah,
and
interesting.
So you have the RP aspects, but you also have to prep. Maybe you need to not only motivate these guys to fight, but you need to teach some people to fight. So you need to roll some skill checks on. Those would probably be intelligence-based or wisdom-based checks, or maybe they'd be performance or persuasion or something. I don't know. Yeah, you could make it fit to whatever player is trying to do whatever they're trying to do. Shore up defenses, so athletic checks to build walls and put up barriers. Intelligence checks to design traps, maybe.
Okay, so there's some stuff you could do.
And
the DM's not going to think of everything, so the players. That's why I think it's worth talking about, because the players can be like, oh, what if we could build a trebuchet or like a ballista or something like that. And I think most DMs are going to be like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, totally. Or I want to go out and be a forward scout. Then you find a bunch of elves coming your way. That'd be pretty neat as well.
I just want to scout out, really get a lay of the keep, especially this little drainage pipe. That seems like a vulnerability. I want to shore that up.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing in one of your overtures that the drainage pipe is the only weakness, if I recall.
So make an intelligence check to look at it. Nat 1. Oh, the drainage pipe is impenetrable, bro.
Those bars are probably whole.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah. And you're like, cool.
It would take a halfling to get through this. These are orcs. So I remember watching it. And then when the elves show up to be like, we're going to honor our commitment to Rohan and all this, our ancient commitment.
What a moment.
I remember thinking, from a player's perspective, like, who is this? Just kind of like a random thing that's happening, or is this like we didn't cause this? But then the more I saw it, I was thinking, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be player cause or player based to still be really cool. And the fact that it was happening at all, I think a player, if I was a player and I was watching this, especially a momentous occasion here, I would have been like, wow, that is awesome.
I think as the DM here, you should really be fomenting a sense of dread and hopelessness for this siege from the beginning, because that's really what it is. They're facing overwhelming numbers in a fort that's well fortified, but they don't really stand a chance.
It's well fortified, but there's no other option.
There's nowhere to go. They're coming. You have to fight them. There are tons and tons of them. And so you kind of slowly build up just a little bit of hope with each one. As long as you start with that foundation of like, you're kind of screwed here.
What is the name of the elf?
It starts with an A. I can't remember it.
Haldir.
I don't know who the actor is, but he is the most, like, in anything I see him in, he just puts up pomp.
Yeah.
So good. He just looks like the most pompous person ever.
That's an NPC.
Even when he says, we are here to honor that allegiance, it's just like, oh, well, are you?
I mean, that's pretty fitting of elves, though. Like, the elves really do think they're above you, because they are. But the Haldir is an NPC that they've, interacted with before. So at least there's some connection to the players there, and not just a bunch of random elves showing up.
If you wanted to tie this to the party as a DM, maybe these elves are attached to Legolas in some way. Maybe they are from his backstory even, and then it could be, something even cooler. And like Nate said, this is an NPC we've interacted with before, and so the party is often going to be excited to receive help from NPCs that they've interacted with in the past. That's always a great moment. And so even if it's not from Legolas's backstory, they can still appreciate it because they've already seen this NPC. I wonder how far back they started out from the woods of Lorien to get to Helm's Deep at like the same time as these people who started out from Edoras.
Elves can fast travel.
Elves, man. I will say, though, if you've, in your campaign, maybe built up this lore of the elves and their reputation, it could definitely have quite an impact. Like it does, I think, in Lord of the Rings. Like, these are a bunch of immortal beings coming and saying, like, we'll fight and die for you, which is a pretty big deal for someone who could potentially live forever if they didn't come and do this.
Yeah, this definitely comes down to world building here. I'm not the biggest fan of immortal elves, but I am a fan of long mortal elves. They live a long time, but definitely there is a mysticism always to elves. I think in like every world that anyone
I
makes.
think it lends a tremendous weight to their sacrifice in this case.
Yes, the power of their sacrifice needs to be highlighted by this moment, and it is. Certainly. Oh my God, what would this battle have looked like without the elves there? Without all those longbows just firing in the first wave, they wouldn't have lasted until the 5th day, I don't think.
For those of you who are big military minds, military buffs like me and Nate, the YouTube channel Kings and Generals did an entire breakdown of Helm's Deep as if they were covering one of their typical historical battles.
Oh, that's neat.
And it's great. It's super fun to look up, and it goes and follows all the big names and all the units from each side of the battle into all the action from start to finish.
On that note, as a medieval combat enthusiast, I have 2 big pet peeves. I think you already know one of them.
Is it the amount of arrows taking down these fully plated armored orcs?
Yeah. It's all of the stuff going straight through what looks to be pretty well-made plate armor. Are all these arrows finding little slips? As far as I could tell, you never see an arrow bounce off of armor or anything like that. That armor is there for show only. But I won't get too far into that.
What are you going to do? Are you going to give all these guys 18 AC?
No,
they're in
definitely
plate?
not. I was just, I'm nitpicking my pet peeves.
I mean, you
stuff.
can. It's okay. I'm ready to die.
My other one is that whole scene where they have them like, all right, ready, draw, and everyone's holding their arrows, waiting to the command to shoot. Like, yeah, nobody does that. Why would you? You're just tiring yourself out. There's no draw, loose.
The most believable part of that scene is when the old man can't hold it and he lets it go.
Exactly. It's like, that's why we don't do that. There's also a lot less of that whole like big arcing arrow thing in history than you would think. A lot more straightforward firing. As far as I know, it was done, that sort of arching fire, but it was more common to have much more straightforward, shorter range fire. Anyway.
Especially from up on walls.
All right. So you can try to make your D&D combat more believable in some senses while we deviate from believability in other senses.
Anyway, throw fireballs at them.
Yeah. That'll solve the problem with arrow physics. Is just throw magic.
However, this is a very low magic world, and if you want to make a big siege in a world that has magic, you have to take advantage or take into consideration what the enemy would have as well. Your DM's probably been thinking about this forever. They're not going to bring catapults. They're going to bring one dude who's casted fly on a bunch of people, and then a bunch of mages are going to go way up high and throw fireballs down. Or your walls are going to be warded against the walls will have magical warding on them so that they can withstand a certain amount of magic. You have a ton of things to consider, especially if you have an industrialized magic army. Because imagine you get 10 mages in a row and you just pump them full of magic missiles.
But why didn't Saruman just go cast a meteor storm on the fort?
Exactly. And what's to stop that? And I'm thinking, I just even thought 3rd level and under. Imagine you do have a 9th level spellcaster there. What the hell are you going to do?
But yeah, that's honestly a terrifying thing to think about. What a siege would be like with people able to throw fireballs and shit at you, like and able to fly over your walls, like.
Being able to just mold earth on your walls to create a hole for them to run through. It's kind of terrifying. You got to have your walls protected somehow.
Yeah, you would either have to build a wall that can withstand that kind of thing, or you wouldn't build fortresses like that at all because they would just get destroyed easily.
You would have mages up on the towers or up on the walls to cast shield against massive waves of magic missile who are going to kill commoners real quick.
So there's so many things that you can do in D&D that make defenses like walls useless, right? And towers not as useful. And so whatever you do as a DM, whatever you throw at your players, I would say just make it obvious that you're doing that. Like, hey, give me a perception check. Oh, you notice these people down at the wall using mold earth on the wall in order to try and degrade the integrity and bring the wall down. Now react to that to try to stop them. Or you see the mages flying up, you notice the one guy has casted fly on all the others. You give them the ability to respond to all these magical threats, because if you don't, if you just deploy an army super tactically against your players, you can overwhelm them in moments. And
that's not the point of the game.
Yeah.
So anyone who hasn't run a big thing like this, you're not rolling dice for each of the enemy armies or any of the people. You're not wasting time. All you're doing, and at least how we run it, is that your characters are focused on what's happening to them. You can just imagine that there are thousands of people all around you. You're focused on the enemies that are populated on the board are the ones that your characters see, or the ones that will interact with them. But within those masses of within those characters they see, there's thousands of other enemy soldiers and everything. You can't get to all of them. The rest of the battle is background.
Yeah, we've definitely talked before about how to run these big battles. Not really a siege before, but this is definitely a case where the whole battle is going on around you. It's not entirely a backdrop. It will affect you, but we're focusing on what these player characters are doing in their own little bubbles, essentially. And you're giving them something like, hey, you got to go handle this one specific thing in the larger battle.
All right, so let's look at what our characters actually encounter in their session, in their combat sessions. I think that the DM, you should always make this clear to your players too, and I think that he makes it clear in this campaign. You will not win. There is no beating the orcs. Your goal is to last until the 5th day. And if you do that, then the cavalry will show up. And so that's adding to the sense of dread too in the pre-battle. And so phase 1 is just purely trying to stop them getting in.
This is the phase, because there is a little bit of it, and I do think you should throw it in as a DM, where you are just doing like minion killing, essentially. It's like you're not doing roll against their HCP. It's kind of like you hit, cool, this dude goes down. Get a little bit of that out of the way so they can be like, yeah, look at us.
Yeah, the ladders come up and people get up on the walls. I think I think that phase 2 starts when the wall is blown up, because phase 1 is they're not even really challenging the door at the keep yet, and so it's just them trying to get in. And so you have people with bows shooting people on the ground, but then orcs come up on the walls and people like Gimli get to fight hand to hand and stuff.
It's this battle that makes it extremely clear that our player characters and everyone else is not. As you see them, like Gimli is taking on 21 or 22, or taking out so many, as you see other people just fall and die like normal. They're just hacking and slashing away, being player characters.
Counting kills is a cool way to add even more stakes to your combat too. Stakes your character will care about, that will make it more fun, but stakes that don't necessarily make it more dangerous. I remember thinking of that, and I was like, that's a cool thing to add to combat that will make you care way more about the combat, but it won't make it deadly, like other times when you care about the combat, because you're like, oh my god, I just want to survive, But they get lots of good combat, and Legolas fails, and the wall is blown up.
I was just going to say, Legolas whipping those shots is the role that the DM was going to happen anyway. He was eventually going to make it no matter what, in order to start phase 2. But if you ask everyone to do a cinematic of what's going on, Legolas is like, yeah, I shoot the rope that's attached to the ladder, so the whole ladder falls. And you're like, I am so good. And then when the rolls start actually coming, the DM's probably thinking, all right, there's going to be 5 waves of people trying to get this thing to explode. First wave explodes. And
he rolls 2 hits and then just like one's on his damage dice or something.
That's what I was thinking, is that it's just one of those really unfortunate cases where maybe you roll 2 ones.
It's like the only guy without armor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because he's the torchbearer. He's got stuff to do.
Berserker dudes.
He's the most devoted person in this entire series. Do you think he knew what was going to happen? Do you think he knew he was going to explode?
No, I think he had no idea. I thought he was just going to...
No, nobody knew. It's, what we see on the screen, it's devastating to our players. They were not prepared for this. And so I would drop hints as the DM. I would drop hints that your bad guys have some sort of capability in order to surprise them later. But if your players go and set up traps and they prepare for this and that and the third thing, but the whole time you were planning to do the 4th thing and then they didn't prepare for it at all, that's really fun to throw your players off, but it can also make them feel a little stilted, as if like, oh, we did all this stuff to prepare and none of it mattered even a little bit. That can be fine if, like I said, you give them hints beforehand. Like, no, you guys knew that black powder was in the mix somewhere, somehow. There was like, I told you about that fort that exploded last week or something, or you explored the ruins of a exploded factory or something like that. Give your players the chance to know about it, but if they know about it, yeah, use it against them.
I think a good way to prep for this sort of thing would be, imagine you're getting ready for Helm's Deep and you tell the players the session ahead of time that there are these 5 things that you need to prepare for. One's the ditch, one is the main gate, and then 3 other things. And they can only take care of 3 out of the 5. So they know that 2 out of the 5 are going to be more at risk. Maybe they have to take care of those in the combat specifically. Yeah. So they can see the fruits of their labor, but also like, hey, we didn't go and check out the culvert, or we tried and it was an @1 or whatever. So that was obviously where we want to put ourselves in preparation to defend in the battle, which is where Legolas was. He was in a position to defend against that.
I'll say, though, this could also just be something that is planned and your players don't actually have any way to prevent. That's okay to do sometimes. I would say in moderation,
totally.
And your players are going to feel like they fail, especially Legolas there. It could have happened in a different way, but that's fine to do sometimes, have these planned things, just in moderation.
Phase 2 was going to happen no matter what. Yeah. So
I was just trying to give some context,
totally.
But you don't always have to have context. You can just do things. Phase 2. We're going into phase 2 because it's cool. Because it's really, we get to the really cool parts of the battle now. When Aragorn's on the ground and he like fire and all those arrows fire past him
right over
down
Gimli.
the hill.
Or actually, I think Gimli falls or something, and then he's like, "Okay, shoot."
He says Aragorn, and he charges off and jumps onto an orc, and then kills another one, and then he gets waylaid onto his back under the water. But this becomes must retreat, basically. That you can fight, but the clock is ticking. You have got to get to safety because now they're pouring through the hole. So there's probably some cool skill checks and stuff that could happen here outside of just movement in combat. We do get to see Legolas, who like maybe failed a second ago. He's just like, you know what I want to do? I'm going to take this shield and I'm going to go down the stairs, and we get to see some really cool rolls on his part.
The player's really butthurt. It's like, I'm not a failure. Watch me do this.
Yeah. And I think, too, that another part that's in this phase is when Aragorn and Gimli go outside of the front gate, and they're trying to hold the front gate. Because now they break out the ram, and they're busting through, and they're actually making a hole. We have to maybe go around. Legolas goes up top to shoot arrows. It's a very obviously very funny scene too.
You'll have to toss me.
Don't tell the elf.
Don't tell the elf.
Aragorn's a cool guy for saying not a word there. That's nice of him. He didn't have to say that.
It's funny. The Two Towers is such like a tragedy, really, or it's building up this tragic moment and all this horrible stuff happening. This big hopeless siege was sprinkled with such silly, lighthearted stuff.
It really does make it feel like it's D&D in
Yeah.
that sense, where there's the whole world and then there's the world that the players are living in, which is them hanging out with buddies on the weekend or on the weekday after work,
Totally.
which is kind of beautiful.
So Aragorn rolls a athletics check and
Yeets him.
tosses him, yeets him,
And they just go to
Yeah,
and
town.
then they just go to town. Why do they need a door? Just have the two of them stand there.
For real.
But this is also, I think, an incredible D&D sequence. Combat, athletics checks, and then Legolas, I think, would need to make athletics checks to pull, and they would have to make athletics checks to hold onto the rope, too, in order to escape.
Yeah, great teamwork
Theoden's
there.
character is making checks to shore up the door and everything. So there's lots of cool
It's also
stuff going on in that one moment.
It's a plan. It's a plan that I could only see a bunch of D&D players coming up
That's a
with, too.
good, yeah. I agree with, yes.
Yeah, and
That's okay. So we'll toss them across, and then we'll kill all of them on the bridge, and then Legolas will throw a rope down to get us. Yeah, okay, you could try.
I'd let them try it. I'd probably let them succeed if it wasn't going to be like, unless I throw a boss battle on the bridge, in which case it could be cool if someone has to die there. But
There are a lot of opportunities for players to die in this siege.
Oh
for
yeah.
characters.
I do remember a difference in the books is that they think that Gimli has died because he was near the explosion on the wall. I think that would have been really cool to have that moment of dread, like, oh no, like Gimli just got blown up, and then he can come up from the water later in a comedic fashion and rah or something. It would be great. And in D&D, that's even more likely, to happen because Gimli was in a really bad spot when he fell in that big puddle of water. That was a really bad spot to be in.
And if that's one of those things you've had, like, yeah, this is going to happen no matter what, it'd be a real dick move to kill a player in something like that.
Prone
Yeah.
underwater. Oh my God. Yeah, I couldn't imagine
Like-
doing that to one of you guys.
uh,
If you know this explosion is happening, you can make it happen. Don't kill a player like that. I keep saying player. Don't kill your players at all. Don't kill a player character like that.
Kill your characters every once in a while. Never kill your players.
That said, a lot of opportunities for player characters to die here by their own choices, maybe. It could be bad rolls. It could be they don't want to retreat or they want to hold the line for someone else to get out of there.
yeah, there would have been, and I do call these good opportunities because player character death is good. Well, I should say, depending on your table, player character death can be good. There are some character players who really probably shouldn't die because they can't handle it emotionally. But if you have players that are willing to die, I would say
Kill them.
all of them.
Player characters.
I would say that this climactic point in an arc would be a better time than any for it to happen. Especially if you can isolate one of them is on a bridge holding it by themselves before a horde of something else comes across. There's this little bit of homebrew that I read a long time ago that I really enjoyed, but it's basically like, are you out of spell slots, but are you in desperation? Start using exhaustion, and basically you can still cast it, but every time you cast, you become more exhausted and more exhausted. And then at, 6 levels of exhaustion, you're dead.
You die. Yeah. That's cool. That's interesting.
And if it's a desperate enough situation and you need to throw out those lightning bolts
Or a counter spell.
or a counter spell,
You would take
Oh,
would
yeah.
take it. Hell yeah, you would take it.
yeah.
A great way to make a glorious last stand as a caster, that's for sure.
But no one dies, at least yet. And they retreat once again into the keep. So you could have
Haldir dies
oh yeah, Haldir dies. NPC.
during the retreat.
That helped us. So painful
Yeah.
for the party.
It was sad, man.
Yeah.
Really? Man, I thought it was sad. He comes, like, sacrificing his immortal life for his pals when he didn't have to.
Yeah.
And on that note, also, if you have an NPC people love,
Totally.
don't be afraid to kill him.
Yeah. But yeah, you should have more checks here of barricading doors and windows. You could have more combat, and you could have skill checks of trying to retreat further into the keep and stuff. But eventually, you're going to get to the point. Even though I do want to say, from the movie perspective, they decide to die. They decide to ride out and meet them. Glorious death. They don't know that Gandalf is here yet, and I don't.
So Aragorn knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
And your
once
players
Gimli
know.
says that,
Your players
And,
have asked
yeah.
you 10 times, what time is it?
the
Yeah.
players definitely know.
But-
That's a good point. So
He convinces Theoden, and Theoden doesn't know. He's going out there as like, this is our last ride. Let's go die. By the way, quick question for this: after they've hold up barricaded themselves in the keep before their last stand, are you going to give your player characters a short rest here?
It depends. It's contextual. If they
I guess,
really
yeah,
are
it's hard
on
to
nothing
say.
else, and maybe they've already had 3 short rests and they only have like 1 or 2 hit dice per, then yeah, I'd give it to them. Why not?
I think if you haven't given them, give your players short rest in the middle of big battles. That's definitely the major takeaway here. And I think that from what we see on screen, this is probably the most likely candidate to be called a short rest period, because every time else in the battle, they're still up on the walls
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, yeah, I wouldn't give them, I don't know about multiple short rests, though. And then, yeah, so they win. They lasted until the 5th day, and we get the coolest battle in fantasy history that inspired so many other battles.
Yeah.
Whoa, you're just going to say that's the coolest when episode 3 of season 8 of Game of Thrones happened?
Is that the Battle of the Bastards?
No, it's the battle for Winterfell.
Oh, it's the old.
And they killed the Night King
Oh,
in an hour.
you said season 8. I didn't even register.
I say that because the directors had likened it to like, this is going to be better than Helm's Deep is something that they said.
Never before have I wanted to fight in the rain in real life. Never. We've all been out rucking in the rain. It sucks. It really sucks. Actually doing combat to life or death, that seems horrifying. I don't want to deal with that. All that said, watching this scene makes me want to fight in the rain. It's so cool. All right, so we should talk about Frodo and Sam then, I guess, too.
I guess. I just want to hang out with Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn all day.
I do want to say a couple of things about it. The first is, this goes back to what I was talking about, extended version versus theatrical cut. I really, really wish we got to see the scene of Faramir and Boromir at Osgiliath. It did so much for Faramir. It did so much for his character in establishing who he is. Because we see that Boromir's the favorite son. We see that he's the one who's like, no, he'll get it done. He'll go protect Gondor and do the thing. But then we know that he didn't. He failed. He actually tried to take the ring, and Faramir, in the end, didn't. It was beautiful. It was poetic, and I feel cheated that it wasn't in the theatrical cut, and I didn't know about it
I
until
thought
now.
it was.
No, it most certainly
I always
is
thought
not.
that was part of the theatrical
It
cut.
is not. I had never seen that scene before, ever.
Holy crap. It's so essential, like you said.
So I love Faramir. He's one of my favorite characters, and I think wholeheartedly, if one of your PCs dies, don't throw away their backstory. Feel free to bring those characters around still. Especially, it feels cool if, oh, we knew your brother, and stuff like that. The fact that he has to, this is more just appreciation of the movie than D&D right now, but
Yeah.
the emotional journey and him having to make the choice, or him realizing that his brother was utterly made it devoted to something. He made an oath to be part of the fellowship and everything, and he'd rather honor that than get into his father's good graces.
Faramir has almost the classic hero's journey type of thing right there in the one movie, and he's a side character. And so it was really great. Faramir is a great addition. The battle at Osgiliath is a pretty cool D&D battle. Um, because if you look at the terrain, you've got all these parapets it looks like you can climb up on, and these crumbled down buildings and stuff, and you have the river, and you have orcs coming over, you have flying Nazgul. There's a lot there to make a really interesting combat encounter, to really throw Sam and Frodo off of their usual groove of how they like to play D&D. And so I just remember watching it. I was like, this would be fun to play because there's so many different things going on. You can go up high real easily and stuff.
Was Gollum getting the snot beat out of him in the original?
I think that they toned that down in the original. Yes, I do not. I certainly don't. The scene where Sam is just like, hey, you know there's no hard feelings, right? Like, he was trying to protect you. That was not in the theatrical cut. And that scene really highlights how beat up Gollum is. He's like hobbling along. His arm is like this.
Yeah, and it's good because earlier in the movie we see Smeagol come out, and Gollum becomes like, he might be turning a new leaf. You know, Smeagol takes control over Gollum, as it were. And then we see him get betrayed by Master. He's beaten to an inch of his life. You know, they don't show blood in this movie, but he's bloody. And then Gollum takes back over the main personality because of all that scorn and his betrayal and all that. Cool moment. Especially imagine that we established that Gollum's a PC, right?
Yeah, great.
Yes.
Oh my God, the RP.
How do you beat the snot out of a player character? I don't know how that would work.
Here's an interesting idea. Boromir's player re-rolls. He creates Gollum.
Yeah.
And then the DM brings part of Boromir's backstory into the campaign. Oh, it's Faramir. And Gollum's like, oh
no.
Can I play my brother for like a couple of weeks or whatever? We'll just keep Gollum prisoner. And then he plays Faramir, and he gets the opportunity to make his wisdom save, and he lets Frodo go, and he's like, yes, all right, I'll go back to Gollum now.
I'll keep beating the shit out of my own character.
You're definitely allowed.
I don't know that we want to call that the D&D canon. It's just a funny idea.
That's a good idea.
That's a cool idea, yeah.
All right, so that's what he does then. He gets the chance to kind of end Boromir's. He like redeems Boromir a little bit. And then he gets to also be the RP machine that is Gollum.
Yeah. And now Gollum's angry again, or Gollum is Gollum again.
I do want to say something else that's a little bit more movie related than D&D related. I forgot to mention this last time we talked about the Fellowship. The Nazgul are worthless. They are useless henchmen. Orcs are better because orcs do more than this. The slow reach towards you. And they did that in the first movie when they were trying to ride alongside them with Arwen. They were like, hey, you could stab Arwen's horse right now in the flank or something. No, I'm going to slowly reach for the ring. They slowly reached for the ring when it was 1-on-5 atop that tower, and then Aragorn comes and saves them. And then we see them traveling through the bog, and I'm like, oh, the useless Nazgul are back. And the DM had to give them flying wyverns now because they're that useless. Well, at least we see the wyvern like eat people later in the battle. I specifically remember seeing that. So I was like, okay, well, that's at least that. And then in Osgiliath, the Nazgul does the exact same thing, and I take it all back. The wyvern did nothing. The wyvern did the slow reach too. So it's just useless, horrible minions that should never have come back.
They're old, dude. They're
old,
so
man.
old. You know, and I think in the first movie they all have their swords up like this, and they all walk towards.
They've got weird old man traditions and things like that.
There's a protocol to
They're
be followed here.
They're spry at times, though. I mean,
in Return of the King, we see them be
but
a
anyways.
little more threatening and badass, but no, you're kind of right. You're kind of right.
Finally,
I've never
yes.
thought about that before.
No,
Nazgul
you're
kinda
right.
suck.
the Mydrall of Wheel of Time are better than the Nazgul.
Oh, for 1,000 times.
Probably not an opinion shared by most, but I
What
definitely
about
believe so.
Dementors from Harry Potter? That's just who they really kind of reminded me of.
They basically are the same. I
Yeah.
would call them the same.
I don't think Dementors have their own neat little ability of taking someone's freaking soul.
And
or
they have a
whatever it
job
is.
too. They
Yeah.
they have a job that their occupation that they are fulfilling. Anyway,
So then this next section of the campaign ends with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas having saved Rohan and moving on towards Mordor, the growing threat in Mordor, and we still have Frodo and Sam and Gollum making their way. We're about to reintegrate Merry and Pippin back into the party, but then some other shenanigans happen. We'll have to see what we think happens with the next party split in at our D&D table, because they do it again.
Well, they rolled like a great investigation check to find the food stores and the Longbottom leaf, or it's not Longbottom, is it?
Oh yeah, that was certainly not in the theatrical
No,
cut
it was not.
because it looks like they're getting high on weed, man. There's no way they would have liked that in 2002.
I love how Treebeard just takes a peek and he's like,
But that brings me to another scene that I understand why they cut down all these scenes. It was already a very long movie. Tough cuts had to be made. I get it, okay? But the scene where Legolas walks up to Gimli and he's like, 42. And then Gimli says, well, I'm sitting pretty at 43. That scene was less than 25 seconds long. Why couldn't have that been in the movie? And it gave this cool little conclusion to their back and forth. And so, the bad decision should have been in the movie, the theatrical cut.
He's twitching because my axe is stuck in his nervous system.
That was, I think, the second funniest part of the movie, other than the end putting his tree hair out on fire.
Yeah, I had never, like I said, I'd never seen that scene because I never watched the extended cut. So, it tickled me to death. It was so good.
He's just wiggling his axe around too in the orc bun. He's like,
Urukai.
Right.
Whatever.
You guys have most D&D moment of the film prepared?
Yeah, throwing Gimli and Aragorn up onto the front of the keep gate to fight. It's a stupid plan. It takes a roll to get there, and then they pull it off.
Yeah, honestly, if I had to pick one, it would be that, or just the overall depiction of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli during the Battle of Helm's Deep. Like I mentioned before, it's just okay, yeah, these are the PCs in a midst of NPCs that aren't doing nearly as much.
Okay. That's definitely a really good one. I actually have a couple, because it struck me every time I was watching a scene. So, after Gollum finds Frodo and Sam, and then they're bringing him along, the first thing they do is they tie him up with rope. And I was like, I can totally see a D&D party doing that. It's just the new guy is just no, I want to be part of the party. But, we met you in a combat scene, so I don't know. So, you know what? You can come with us, but only if you're tied up. And so the RP machine that Gollum is, he's just wailing. He's like, it burns. It freezes us. He's just going back and forth. I thought that was really funny in a D&D context. I think that Legolas not making the shot is a very D&D moment. You could probably write it a couple of different ways. You could say that he made the shot and he just rolled low on the damage. You could say he didn't hit, and you could flavor it as your arrow hits, but it doesn't do enough damage to actually slow him down. And then he rolls again and he doesn't hit, but you can still just describe it as it hits, but isn't enough to actually stop him. That is the same as them hitting and not doing enough damage to bring him down, basically. Especially if it's for you to initiate phase 2. So I was like, yeah, that's just Legolas. But I really liked how Ryan pointed out a second ago, Legolas was bringing down entire ladders by shooting the ropes. So I think that he just didn't make the rolls this go around, and it was a really untimely chance to not make your roll. And then right after that is another very D&D moment, because Legolas, like Ryan already kind of talked about this when I brought it up earlier, Legolas is so pissed that he didn't make the shot, and so he is so frustrated and unsatisfied. He goes, okay, so what I want to do is I want to ride a shield down the stairs like a snowboard, and then I'm going to use my action surge so that I shoot 1, 2, 3, 4 arrows on the way down the stairs, or maybe just 3 arrows, and on my last attack, I want to forego using my bow, and I want to use an athletics check to kick this shield into somebody's neck. And he rolls a nat 20 because what else is that but just some other high-ass roll of him sending that shield into somebody's neck?
His modifiers, his dex modifier is probably +8, +9, and so all he realistically has to do is hit like a 15 on these rolls, and all 7 times he does.
I think the DM just made the DC a little lower as
Yeah,
compensation.
possibly.
Yeah, maybe you have a player who's just like, I definitely fall under this sometimes. I'll get frustrated if I miss a certain crucial rolls or rolls that I believe are crucial. Throw your character a bone, or throw your players a bone sometimes.
Especially if they build their character around one thing. Like,
And they failed.
The thing I can do is shoot a bow better than anybody. Or the thing I can do is cast this one kind of spell in this one scenario, but then it depends on a wisdom save being made, and they make the save, and so the spell fails. It's just like, oh, well, throw him a bone. Oh, I have one more thing I want to say, and it's the most Marine Corps moment of the film.
Oh gosh, is it just them running in the beginning?
To anybody who doesn't know, all 3 of us are Marine Corps veterans, and yeah, Ryan, it is. As they're running in the beginning, Gimli goes, "Keep breathing. That's the key. Keep breathing." And I was just like, I've said that to myself before, and
I've also heard people talk about how, like, I'm more of a sprinter than a long distance guy,
Yeah, that's great line, beautiful line, but I just wanted to get that in there.
So that was our movie talk on Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the second movie in the trilogy. Next time we do a movie talk, we're going to be covering Return of the King, so please feel free to come back if you like what we do here. If you like Lord of the Rings and you like us, we've also done a party talk, in which we took a draft out of the Lord of the Rings roster of characters, and Nate and I went head-to-head to decide which one of our teams of 4 draft was the better adventuring party. And Steve was our arbiter, and he was the one making the actual decisions. He was the judge.
The DM.
The DM. But yeah, if you like what we do, feel free to come back and do all the things that you need to do to support us. Click whatever is applicable to whatever you're watching us on.
Yeah, click the things.
Click things. And have a good day.
See you next time.
Bye.